and welcome to the For Evansville podcast. My name is Adrian. I'm here with Jonathan and Mayor Lloyd Winnecke today. We're really excited that you're here today, but this is just a podcast about people who not just live in Evansville, but are for Evansville. And we thought, you know, the person we think was the most for Evansville is probably you. So we're so glad that you're here this morning. Actually, this morning when I was explaining to my son why I was leaving the house so early, I was trying to explain to him your job. He's 5, so he doesn't understand the concept of mayor. And he said, so he's really the king of Evansville.
Well,
So our first question today is, what's it like being king of Evansville?
Well, the crown is heavy. No, I'm just telling you that.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being here with us this morning. And, you're coming up on kind of the end of your time as mayor, so we thought it would be really great to just take some time reflecting with you on your time as mayor and your thoughts on Evansville. And so first, I'd just love to hear what's been maybe the most rewarding thing about being the mayor of our city.
There are a lot of ways to answer that. There's sort of brick and mortar answers to it, and then sort of answers that are more difficult to describe. But I'm sure once you sort of hear it, you go, oh, yeah, I see that. So I'll start there, the harder part.
Okay.
So the thing that gives me a lot of pride is the sense of collaboration that happens here. And I know mayors in just about every city say, oh, yeah, people collaborate. But I talk to mayors all over Indiana, and I'm frequently asked, how did you get this done? How did that happen?
Yeah.
And I just think that's our secret sauce. We have this ability as a region, actually, I believe, to set aside institutional agendas, individual egos or individual agendas, leave them at the door for the greater good. I think people have bought into the fact that if something good happens in Evansville, it helps Boonville and Chandler and Princeton, and that people who work in the same space in Evansville don't have to work in silos. Sure. They can work together, and maybe they alter their mission somewhat because there's mission creep from both organizations or something. But it's just crazy to me the number of people that I can call and say, hey, we need to work on X. Can you get a group of people in your space to come? And we start talking through problems, and people, we could do that if you could do that.
Right.
So I think that makes me really, really proud. And then I would look at sort of the bricks and mortars part of it, and I look at the medical school. I think because today that's, 2 nice buildings and more buildings to come, I will tell you, on that campus. But in 20 years or 30 years, our residents are going to say, wow, that was really good for our region because we have a whole new pipeline of healthcare professionals. They're being educated right there.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when the IU School of Medicine raised its hand and said, we need to expand in Evansville, and the city of Evansville stood up, along with U of E and USI, and we figure out how to build medical education, graduate and undergraduate classes on one campus in one building.
Yeah.
We stepped up, and the state made a large financial investment. Certainly the city did, but that activity there that we see today that people wonder, I wonder what goes on in there. It's phenomenal medical education at both graduate and undergraduate levels. So I look at that, and that makes me feel really proud. And that's not to say I don't like all the quality of life projects that we've done.
Sure.
And we've done all those with many community partners, whether it's the Deaconess Aquatic Center, the Kinney Family Penguins of Patagonia exhibit. I mean, the list goes on and on. But every success our city has had is because people have come together. They're not my successes per se. They're the community successes. And that's because people have said, oh, I recognize how I can be a part of something, how I can be for something. And that just makes me feel really good.
Yeah. It sounds like you're sort of saying that in our community, individual people or organizations see themselves as part of a larger whole. And whenever they come together, that collaboration is kind of born out of not just thinking about here's what we're doing, here's what we can do, but seeing that bigger picture in the city.
Yeah, and I think people feel like they can be in Evansville and really contribute at a high level.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you're new to the community because you're going to USI or U of E or Ivy Tech.
Sure.
Maybe you're new to the community and you're finding a new faith home and you're trying to figure out how you fit in. But in a city the size of Evansville and the way we welcome people, a newcomer can come in and make a significant impact in either a nonprofit, a community organization, a faith community, with a snap of a finger.
Yeah.
I mean, it's that easy. And I think that's really a tribute to the citizens that we have who recognize, hey, we need all of us to contribute to be successful.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've had a number of people on our podcast say that exact thing. If they felt like they could make a significant contribution to Evansville and kind of shape the way it's moving forward. It seems like such a developing city. And I would even say, do you feel like the medical school has kind of jump-started or kick-started the growth of downtown?
It has been a really key component. It's been a whole process. Certainly the construction of the Ford Center was the first piece.
Sure.
That was a really important piece. And from it, we could build on to a convention hotel, connect it. That allows us to bring a lot of sports tourism events, and then the medical school. And then from the medical school, where there are, literally several hundred people in that building every day during a school year, all those folks need to eat lunch. Some have dinner also. Many live near downtown. We've had, probably 50 or 60 businesses on Main Street or around Main Street that have opened because of the presence of the medical school. So those are all just sort of side benefits, but the main beneficiary are all of us as we age and we continue to need better healthcare.
Right.
Because, the students that I greet the start of every school year, they may be my doctor in 10 years. I hope to goodness they are.
Yeah, that's really good. Are there any other, well, first of all, do you feel like it's always been that way in Evansville, or are there things that have changed, or maybe over the course of your time as mayor or your course of time in Evansville, that you think have made that shift so that people are more collaborative and do see those opportunities to contribute? And what do you think the ingredients to that are that have made Evansville unique in that way?
Well, I think there are a lot of ways to answer that. I'd start by saying there was probably a time, I'm an Evansville native, so I feel like I can say this with a straight face. I think there was a time, and probably for a pretty good length of time, where many citizens didn't feel like we deserved really nice things.
Sure. It's kind of good enough.
It's good enough.
Yeah.
It's a very humble community. And maybe people didn't see the wisdom in making large investments in quality of life amenities. And then all of a sudden we have them and they're like, all of a sudden we're starting to carry ourselves like we are the third largest city in Indiana.
Sure.
And policymakers in Indianapolis and beyond who are making key decisions about where to invest money and where to invest programming, they look at us differently because I think we carry ourselves differently. I think the Ford Center had a lot to do with that. There were a lot of people who were not for it. I was one who was very for it. And Mayor Winnecke, I think, deserves a lot of credit for having the fortitude to build the Ford Center. I think that was the first, hey, we deserve something nice and big that is an attraction. And because we have the Ford Center, we have country music after country music act, many of whom I've never heard of, but we're putting 8,000 or 10,000 people per concert into the arena. That means they're downtown. They all want to eat and have fun. It's brought us the Ohio Valley Conference men's and women's basketball tournament that might still be in Nashville or might be elsewhere. We have a really great relationship with the OVC. We have a phenomenal relationship with the NCAA. Our hosting the D2 Elite 8 is big. It puts us on national television. So I think all that is as a result of the Ford Center. And, you see your city highlighted on national television. You're like, wow,
Yeah.
we just, okay, what else can we do?
Yeah.
So I think there is a different mentality today. And as in, if we don't invest in our community, who will?
Right.
And how do we get you to invest if we don't?
Yeah.
That's a hard question to answer with a straight face.
Yeah. So it's sort of like these big projects and investments sort of shift the way people think about their city, and then maybe motivates them to say, what could I build? What kind of contribution can I make? How can I make Evansville a little bit better, than it was before?
No, I think that's absolutely right. I'm sitting here thinking about now the Deaconess Aquatic Center. We had not been in office, my gosh, somewhere we have the whole chronology, but this will be directionally accurate, if nothing else, a few months. And some folks from the aquatics community came and said, hey, Lloyd Pool is terrible. The walls are separating from the floors. I'm not an engineer, but I'm pretty sure that's not a good thing.
Right.
And, it's an embarrassment to have swim meets there. I mean, there was so much, it was obvious at the time we needed to replace it, but less obvious was what we needed, how to do it, where to put it. So it took a while to get to that solution, but that solution has already landed us the 2025 NCAA Division II National Swimming and Diving Championships.
Wow.
So all those people come to Evansville,
Right.
probably most of whom had never heard of Evansville.
Yeah.
We know that local swimming has grown as a result of the Aquatic Center. And as a lifetime sport, if you're swimming, you should be healthier.
Right.
I think you have a greater propensity for better health if you're swimming and exercising. So all that contributes to how people look at their city. And it's tough to look at those kinds of amenities and not feel really good about where we are as a community.
Yeah. I also recently heard that there's an underwater hockey league that meets at the Aquatic Center. Have you heard about this?
I have. I'm not sure how it works.
I'm not sure either, but I did look it up on YouTube, and it's fascinating to watch. So that's a little
I'm not
but
an accomplished enough swimmer to be confident to do that. I can't jump off of a diving board, and that's the extent of my aquatic prowess, I think.
Yeah, but that is a great example of, that was a big project, and it inspired somebody to say, you know what we need in Evansville? Underwater hockey.
Who would have thought?
And they may not have done that had that not been an available resource. So, well, it's fun to talk about, big, exciting projects and kind of the positive, rewarding side of being mayor. What are some of the things that have been most challenging over your time as mayor, or some of the biggest challenges that you've seen in our community in general?
Yeah, that's another. I mean, you can answer that a zillion different ways. I'll start with housing, because we just happen to be working on some housing initiatives right now. Affordable housing is a big. Every mayor I talk to in Indiana has a deficit of affordable housing. So we're all out trying to encourage developers to come to our communities to build affordable housing units, whether they're single family or multifamily. So that is certainly one. And the challenge there is meeting with community organizations and leaders who raise the issue, but it's something that you just don't snap your fingers and all of a sudden you have 1,000 new affordable housing units.
Yeah, there's no easy solution to that problem.
Well, there's no quick way to fix it. The reality is, I think it's like we have 51 or 52% of our housing stock predates 1960. Mm-hmm. Well, that means it's now older than me. Mm-hmm. And as you can tell by my hair, I'm getting old. So that means housing stock is. And but again, you have to have money, and you just don't go out and build 100 new units overnight. It takes time to find a developer who has to have a location, who has to have the capital stack available to do whatever you want them to do. So that is definitely an issue. I think about the scourge of opioids and drug misuse and alcohol misuse. That's an issue that a mayor certainly comes to the mayor's desk and the mayor's office, but there's no silver bullet. There's no
Right.
you snap your
Here's
fingers.
what we can do to fix that.
I mean,
Yeah.
but again, you pull people together who work in this space every day and say, help me find solutions, help us find solutions. And you empower them to expand their programming and their resources. And you look for funding.
Right.
Everything comes back to funding.
Right. If you had just unlimited money, it'd be a lot
this job
easier.
would be a lot easier if you didn't have to always fight for money. But that's
Right.
and that's very emotional. We're spending a lot of time on mental health right now.
Yeah.
If you had told me in 2012 when I took office that over the years I'd spend as much time in the mental health space as I am, I would have laughed at you.
Sure.
But the fact of the matter is, we convene a lot of groups. We've asked a lot of people to come together for the express purpose of identifying deficits in mental health need or mental health availability or for care, and then how do you fill that need? We're working on a very large project that I hope in the next 200 days that's my time remaining. So we hope to have a major announcement that will be really impactful in the mental health space. But we've been working on it for 18 to 24 months and involves multiple organizations coming together again.
Right.
So that is a challenge as a mayor I see. I suspect that these mental health issues were sort of under the radar, and then the pandemic hit. And then I think it surfaced. It surfaced.
Right.
And certainly reacting to the pandemic was among the most challenging things we'd ever done because we just didn't know. We made decisions on a daily basis, sometimes an hourly basis, and we might change course from day to day.
Right.
One of the things that is very interesting, I just had this conversation last night with someone. Because of relationships really are key to just like everything we do in life. I mean, I don't care if you're trying to sell a car, sell a house, or manage a city, you need relationships.
Right.
We're really blessed to have really strong relationships with leadership of the health systems, and our health department, and our schools. So when the pandemic hit, like within short order, we had daily calls between the two hospitals, the health department, the school system, the Catholic Diocese superintendent, USI, U of E, and the mayor's office.
Yeah.
And we heard firsthand what was happening here. We didn't have to rely on, some talking head about what's going on in Houston or Los Angeles or New York. We knew what was going on here, so we could make decisions in a timely fashion based on what was happening here.
Right. You already had the trust established, and the relationship established.
Yeah. So
you didn't have to feel that out in the middle of a crisis.
Exactly. You can react to a crisis so much better when you have solid, trustworthy relationships. I was on a lot of Zoom calls with mayors during that period, and many of them were complaining about their health systems and their health department.
Sure.
And I'm texting the association director saying, these guys, my colleagues are missing the boat.
Right.
Yeah.
Finally, I couldn't stand it any longer, so I had to unmute and say, okay, time out. You all have to take the lead, and you have to know who's running your hospitals, your health department, and you have to take the lead to be the convener to pull people together. And it's easier said than done, but again, when you have those relationships, when it's, seems like it's a disaster at every turn, you at least have some colleagues who are informed in this space that could help you.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good. I'm curious, a lot of those community challenges that you talked about are not things that I would imagine you would have been as involved in or even maybe even cared as much about if it weren't for your position as mayor. Unless those issues touch your life personally in a way, it's easy to just think of them as somebody else's problem. And so I'm curious to hear your perspective on how has being mayor and having kind of a personal stake in needs that affect other people in a very personal way, how has that maybe changed your relationship with our city going forward? And would you have any advice for people who aren't in a position like that where they maybe have an opportunity to contribute or a role that they could play, but it's not just going to be, put in front of them like it is for somebody who's in a position of responsibility and leadership?
That's a really great topic and question. I think everyone has a role if they choose, and everyone can make a difference. And it's probably easy to sit at home or sit in your car and thinking, hey, there's a problem. Yeah, the city will deal with that.
Right.
Luckily, we have enough residents who take ownership of something, who are empowered by whatever means to step forward and raise issues and be part of solutions. So I guess my thought is, if everyone took a little bit of time to find an issue that touches them in some way.
Sure.
And maybe it's mental health, because maybe you know someone who's died by suicide. Or maybe you know someone whose son or daughter or aunt or uncle died from an opioid overdose. There are ways to get involved, and your involvement at whatever level can be very impactful. Over the years, people have asked why Carol and I go to so many events.
Sure.
They say, "Oh, you're everywhere." Well, we are, but there's a method to our madness, and it's this. If our presence at an event can get one more person to show up, to volunteer, to write a $100 check or a $10 check, or just come up with a new idea, our time, it was worth our time to be there.
Right.
So everyone has a role to play, and it's easier to sit back and just say someone else will do it. Maybe a not-for-profit, maybe the city, maybe a faith community, but everyone can do something. Right. And it's just finding something that touches your heart that you say, I want to make a difference in this.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be big. It can be whatever you want it to be. Maybe it's volunteering at an event. Maybe it's organizing a fundraising event for a group. Maybe it's writing a $10 check. That helps somewhere.
Yeah. It's really good.
Yeah, we were going to ask you, we asked you to speak at Ep9 Evansville a while back when we first started, and you spoke about being a good neighbor. And it seems like that's kind of what you're talking about still. We were going to ask you if you still had the same message of being a good neighbor, and it seems like that is still the same message.
It's funny. I mean, I've spoken at a zillion places over the years, but I remember that in particular because I think my message surprised some people.
Because it was a room full of church leaders who were there, and we were asking, hey, what can the faith community do? And I think we were expecting, hey, get involved in this issue, get involved in that issue. And the response was, can you just help people be better neighbors? Yeah,
I mean, it sounds so simple, and I would say, while I'm sure we've made strides, the example I used then, and I would say it still holds true today, most of the complaints that we get into the mayor's office, or probably any department in the city of Evansville, has to do with a neighbor complaining about a neighbor. I think that's, I would say, the overwhelming percentage. And so, and in many cases, it's someone that doesn't know their neighbor, and they don't like the fact that they've done something, whether it's weeds or trash or an RV that hasn't, been able to drive in 20, whatever it is. But instead of going next door and kind of working things out, they call the city and they want the city to sort of mediate this dispute. And I'm not looking to have less work for city employees. That's not the point. But the point is, if we know our neighbors better, think how much stronger our community would be. And it's, we shouldn't just do it. In the example of the faith communities, it's just not on Sunday mornings or whatever day you worship. It's knowing your neighbor every day.
Right.
This is not rocket science, but we would be such a stronger community if we knew more about our neighbors, if we knew when they were in need,
Right.
and sometimes a little need, sometimes a big need, and we weren't always combative.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I still see that. I see that as something that we should continue to strive to be better at.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what success looks like,
Yeah.
but I know that we can be better at it.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious because you talked a lot about collaboration kind of on the leadership level in our city, and how in order for that to happen, people have to leave their egos at the door and they have to see themselves as part of something bigger. And it seems like your leadership and the leadership of a lot of other folks in our community has helped to cultivate an environment where that's possible, even among people who have very different political opinions or faith perspectives or all of these different things. And that feels really unique to Evansville, especially in this time whenever things are more and more polarized. So I'm curious, is there something there in terms of can we draw some principles from that leadership level down to the personal neighbor level that, like, I know I've heard you talk about just the importance of being kind to people and relationships and things like that. So I'm curious, what advice would you have for neighbors in our community who are just trying to get along?
Well, a saying I use a lot, especially when I speak in schools, especially in elementary and middle schools, is nice matters.
Mm-hmm.
And I sincerely believe that. I use it so much that Steve Schaefer, the deputy mayor, a few years ago, had a wooden desk plate made for me that says nice matters. And instead of putting it in my office on my desk, it sits in our conference room.
Mm.
And it's intentional. Its placement is intentional. I want people who come into that conference room who don't always agree on whatever topic is going to be, is that we're going to respect each other.
Yeah.
So I guess my advice for neighbors and neighborhood leaders is, nice matters, show empathy, even in disagreement. Because, I'm not naive enough to think we're going to agree with everything our neighbor does.
Yeah.
Carol and I have been married over 30 years. We don't agree on everything.
Right.
But we're still nice and loving and respectful to each other.
Yeah.
And I don't know why neighbors shouldn't be the same.
Yeah.
Well, when you were talking about the collaboration that was happening during the pandemic, it was because of that built and established trust already. And I was thinking, okay, if we apply that to the neighbor level, it's important to establish and build trust, not because it's important to do that anyway and be nice and know your neighbors and have that relationship, but also if something were to happen, like during the pandemic, it's nice to have some community because we were all just stuck in isolation for so long. But it'd be nice to have build that trust with your neighbors so that you can help each other out and support each other, check on the elderly or the ones with, autoimmune disorders.
Well, I think that's a really good point. I think we're really blessed we have a great neighborhood of neighborhood organizations. The United Neighborhood of Evansville, UNO, are umbrella agencies that help, I think, 30 some odd neighborhood associations. They do a great job. And one of the most moving things that we get to do every year is the Spark Plug Banquet, where all these neighborhood associations award a spark plug to one person or a group or a couple or something that has been meaningful in the previous year to that neighborhood. And these are folks that you're not going to see on the evening news.
Sure.
And they're not going to be highlighted necessarily anywhere in media. And I don't mean that as a criticism. These are just folks who are doing what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. And every October at UNO's Spark Plug Banquet, if I could speak, we celebrate them. And, whatever neighborhood association gets up and they announce their winner and they do a little profile. And, it's humbling for me, one, to know all the good work, but, I think I'm pretty plugged in about what's going on. I learned so much about what's happening at a neighborhood level that is really, it's powerful and it's meaningful. But I think if we can take that sort of spark plug approach on a daily basis, so we're not just recognizing it in October, but I think one of the things that I think the neighborhood associations were probably a big help during the pandemic because of what you said. I mean, I think they know their neighbors. The neighborhood leaders know the neighborhoods, and I'm sure I'm sure they saved lives because they thought, oh, I haven't seen Bob or Dave or Susie in a while. Let me check in on them.
Yeah, that's really good. Well, Mayor, thanks for taking the time to be with us.
My pleasure. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, it sounds like the message is whether you're building stadiums or just building a friendship with your neighbor, think about what's the contribution that you can make. So
there you go. Yeah, absolutely.